Alright, we got everything cleaned up here. We're ready to put it back together. We've got our O-ring here on the compression chamber, and if you recall, we cut that in a different video. What that means is it seats up in here in the tube against a lip, and it's not going to seal here anymore. It's going to seal here where the O-ring is, so we really don't have to worry too much about the surface here, the lip or the seat on the inside, other than to clean off the asbestos that was on there. And I did that with a pick, a dental pick, and then with a razor, box cutter basically. And you have to clean up this surface here. The inside here had some, and the surface in here had some. So we cleaned up those three, polished everything up. Now we're ready to put it back together. And we've got to start, I think, with the check valve, which is right here. And the check valve is pretty straightforward. You see here there's, this is recessed here. So we're just going to put the check valve seal in there. And by the way, I got these seals from Henry Ford. He has a shop on eBay and he sells these rebuild kits. And so we got that in there. The stud goes in. And then we can hold this I put it in the vise usually, but for present purposes here, put it in like that. And you see this end has, this end has the slot for the screwdriver. So we just tighten that up just a little bit. Doesn't have to be crazy tight, like so. And then that's ready to go in to the compression chamber. And let's take a quick look in there with our test long. If you look inside the compression chamber, that seal we just put in is going to seat against the center. The center actually is raised up. It's elevated above the outside of the compression chamber. So it's going to fit up in there. And while we have this apart, let's take a quick look into the tube itself. And let's see here. There's the, well, we'll turn it like that. There's the transfer port on the, if I can get it on top there. Come on. Well, anyway, there's the lip there that used to seal this up, and it's not anymore. And there's some threads, if you notice. That's where the nut that holds all this in place screws into the threads in the tube. First thing we're going to do is put this in the tube, and then we're going to add the check valve that sits against that seat in there. We have the exhaust valve spring here, and they sometimes look different. Let's see if I don't have one handy here, but they sometimes are that kind of a spiral. Well, they look like that. That's actually the trigger spring. But so that goes in. Then we have the other. We might as well put this together while we're at it. This is the other seal. It's going to go into the exhaust valve like so, and this seal fits in there like that, and then we screw this in to the top. And then I'm actually going to take this over to the bench vise, hold this in the bench vise and tighten it. So I'll be back in just a second here. Okay, I'm back. So this is going to go in here like that. This is going to go in here, the spring, and between this surface and this surface we need to put a seal so that air doesn't escape past that joint. And there you have it. What happens, pump the air in, pushes the intake valve off of its seat, but the spring pressure here basically holds all the compressed air in the compression chamber. As you pump it, you stop pumping, and that pressure from inside there plus the pressure of the spring pushes the intake valve back up against the seat so the air doesn't escape there. Then, when you fire the gun, the hammer comes, hits that stem, knocks this off of its seat. Air goes around the stem and out the transfer port here, up into the barrel and pushes the pellet out. So that's the basic idea of this thing. And let's go ahead and start putting it together. Okay, so while we're at it here, let's take a look, because there's been a lot of changes in the internals of these guns over the years. We've already talked about the change to the compression chamber here, where they added an O-ring groove at some point. But you see that this one has kind of a conical shaped seal here that fits into this cone shaped seat there. But if you take one apart, it might look more like this, and this is ugly, I admit it. I don't know where I got this, but it was a bunch of old parts from somewhere. But this one, you know, they're very similar, but the shape of the seal on this one is flat. If I can get that out of there. You know, you can see it's a flat seal, and it sits inside of a flat recession here and seals against a flat surface here. So you may have one like that, and it's just one of the things that you run into. Alright, first thing we're going to do is put in the compression chamber. Oh, well actually, first thing we're going to do is get this trigger out of the way. If you can't see it here, but the sear sticks up into the tube just a little bit. So when you're putting this in or taking it out, the compression chamber, you need to get the trigger sear out of the way. So what we're going to do is just wire it back here, and we're going to put in the compression chamber into the tube, and should go in not too much trouble, but there it is. Now at this point you may want to blow this out or run a rag in there and clean it up. Make sure that the seat doesn't have any debris on it. Alright, for our next trick, we're going to go ahead and put in the check valve. We just drop it in there. Make sure it goes in the hole, and I decided to go ahead and use the original check valve spring. It's this barrel looking thing. Drop that in. Then comes, actually what we're going to do is put the nut on here, and then we'll put this in the vise and install the exhaust valve. So let me get that set up. So we're here in the vise. The compression chamber is in the tube, the check valve, the spring. We're going to install the exhaust valve and the exhaust valve nut in it. Something like that. Take the tool for the nut. If you look down inside, you can see the barrel actually is slightly misaligned, but there's nothing we can do about that. And there's the seal for the exhaust valve. So it has to go in a little further than that. And see if we can get that nut started here. Now if you look down through the transfer port again, you'll see the exhaust valve is spinning. And when we get it, there's the transfer port starting to show up. Where'd it go? There it is. So another turn or two and it'll be aligned straight up into the barrel. That's pretty close. So now we're going to get a pin punch so that we can tighten this nut without the transfer port continue, or the exhaust valve continuing to spin. So I went ahead, we reused the old pump lever. It seemed like it was in pretty good shape. Most of them are pretty well buggered up, but this one was all right. And I'm going to use the Mach 1 flat top piston here. You can see that there. Rather than this style. There's nothing wrong with these. They've been, this shape and similar material for almost 100 years. But I think these seal better and allow you to adjust the stroke so that it barely touches the front of the compression chamber in the tube. So go ahead and get this started. We have the front plug there, and if you'll have one like this, there's on this sliding thing here, you have a dimple here on one side, and there's also a dimple on one side here of the pin. So as it goes in, a little bit of secret sauce here. Pin goes in, and then all you have to do is slide the cover back down so that the dimple fits into the dimple in the pin. And there it is. Pump it a couple of times here just to make sure it works. Where's my mallet? Here it is. Tap with the mallet. Okay, so we're getting air into the compression chamber. It's firing. What we do now is we pump it up, let's say 8 times or so, and then let it sit overnight. And if it holds air, we're good to put the rest of it back together. So see you tomorrow. Okay, let's talk about polishing here a little bit. There's a couple of places you have to polish. One is we looked way down inside the compression chamber at that seat. And there's a couple ways you can polish that. One, you can get a piece of like a 3M abrasive and put a piece of tape on a this is 1/8 inch drill rod here, and put it inside there. This is, you'd have to cut it to make it fit, but you can push it up in there. Chuck this up in your drill and just put it up in there and, polish that seat. That's one way to do it, and that works pretty good. Another way is if you get a piece of aluminum here, like this, and this is, I think, 530 thousandths, something like that. So it has to be smaller than 1/2 inch, or 1/2 inch or smaller. And you could put some sort of wet dry paper. This has got 220 on this end and I think 320 on that end. And you could wrap tape around this So it's a snug fit, and you don't want it to go crooked like that. You want it to be straight, and then you can just kind of work that and polish that seat. Turn it over, go to the 320, polish it like that. And you can make as many of these as you want and have, I mean, you can go to 600, 1500 grit, whatever. Or if you have to take some scratches out, you can go to a coarser grit. So that's another way. I actually made some of these up so that I can chuck this up in my drill. This is sized so that it fits in there pretty snug, can't get too far crooked. And then I can hold this and run my drill to polish that seat up. So that's how I do that one. You also have the seat in the middle here where the exhaust valve, you know, seats. And I'll put this, I'll get that nut off of there, both the nuts. I'll put this into a drill press, and then you can, as it's turning, you can just kind of hold this up in here and polish that surface. I don't know if you can see that, kind of like that. Now the other two surfaces, I've already covered this up with the seal, but while it's in the drill press, you can press it down against some 3M or whatever kind of material this is that you're going to use, and it'll clean up the surface, the outside surface and the inside surface, and a little bit inside the groove there. And what I'll do is I'll take, this is 400 grit wet dry paper, and kind of conform it to the circle there. And as this is spinning, I'll put that in there, and that cleans up the inside of the groove. And then for this one, it's the same kind of thing. You have to clean this up. So if you can fit that into your drill and bring it down against some sort of an abrasive, that's a good way to clean that one out. All right, we're here the next morning. It's sat here all night with 8 pumps in it, we hope. The pump arm has stayed in this position. If it swings out, that tends to indicate that you're leaking out the check valve. But it's in good shape there, so let's see if we have any air here. Quick tap on the exhaust valve, and we have air. Okay. All right, let's get this together. We have our sleeve. Goes in. Like that. The spring, hammer spring, goes in. And then we should be able to see the, kind of hard to see here, but you've got, this is the exhaust valve stem here. So we're going to put the nut, small nut, right in there. Get our tool. See if we can screw it onto the end of that. Okay, once we get it started, screwing it in. Okay, and then comes the hammer. Make sure it cocks. It does, and fires. Put in the bolt, and we shouldn't be able to get it in because we put the knob on. You can look off. Bolt in, and now the knob can go back on. Okay, the last thing is to put the stock on, and originally these came with a piece of cork here between the metal and the wood, and I don't have any, so we're going to try and make do without it. Get this nut started. And there you have it, Crosman 101. Ready to shoot.